Welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. This is a podcast dedicated to educating and empowering women from preconception, pregnancy, birth, and through early motherhood on wellness lifestyle. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton. I'm a maternity pediatric chiropractor, functional medicine practitioner, and mother who has hand-selected experts and natural holistic healthcare specialties to shine light on options and choices during this exciting phase of a woman's life. And today's topic, we are going to focus on reclaiming the lost generational knowledge of breastfeeding with Jaimie Zaki. Jaimie Zaki is here to help you enter motherhood with confidence. After realizing the medical maternal wellness system was not set equipped to truly help mothers and babies thrive, she made it her personal mission to do her part to help bridge the gaps of maternal health and wellness support. As a new mother who had just experienced a difficult and unwanted cesarean birth, Jaimie dreamed of a peaceful breastfeeding experience to bond with her new baby. Instead, she was met with pain, misery, an angry baby, and heartbreak. The support structures she assumed would be in place to solve these issues were not able to help them reach their goals, and even in many ways to undermine her innate desire to nurse her baby. After finding mother-to-mother support that dragged her through the darkest days of her postpartum experience, Jaimie decided that more support was needed in the world, and instead of conforming to and trying to fix a broken structure within the corporate medical model, she would step outside of that model to help mothers where they were, at home. This is why Jaimie embarked on a journey to become a birth doula and an international board-certified lactation consultant. After welcoming 5 babies, she has learned that wellness exists most naturally when we find the right balance between allopathic medicine and holistic wellness, ultimately learning 2 things: informed consent and trusting our intuition. Her goal is to help mothers find this balance as they seek wellness in pregnancy, postpartum, and beyond. Hi, Jaimie. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have you on today.
Hi, how are you? I'm so glad to be here.
So I know you're very, very passionate about all things breastfeeding, and our topic today is going to be focusing on reclaiming the lost generational knowledge of breastfeeding, along with, I'm sure, a lot of other great juicy breastfeeding tips that you'll share with our mamas listening. But let's start off with talking about you and kind of your journey of how you got to the place that you're at now.
Yeah, of course. First of all, I just want to say I'm so glad to be here. I love connecting with other healthcare providers, wellness people who can inspire moms to really take charge of their wellness and own their story. Because I think so many of us are kind of told one thing growing up about how to be healthy and what healthcare and wellness looks like. And then we get into it as adults and like everything is just not the way that we've always been told it was. And that's kind of how breastfeeding was for me. As a nurse, I was, told breast is best. And that's what I believed because that's what I was taught. And I do believe that in so many ways, but it's not just a matter of I chose to breastfeed. And so breastfeeding works easily because it's natural. We all think breastfeeding is natural. It's going to come naturally. And that ended up not being my reality. And it really threw me for a loop with my oldest child. And I was like, that's okay. My doctors and my nurses are going to save the day. And I put all my trust into them to help me navigate breastfeeding. And they didn't have the skills or the experience or the education to do that. And it kind of was like well, I don't know what to tell you. Why don't you just stop trying so hard and try some formula, move on, because it's not worth trying so hard. And that wasn't good enough for me. So I am a really stubborn person and I fought really hard to get support and answers. And finally I did after 6 weeks of struggling and suffering, dreading every single feed with my newborn. I couldn't even enjoy the newborn days. I always tell people I don't remember him being a newborn. I just remember the first month being miserable breastfeeding. And then I got help. I got the right help. I found the right support. I found everything that I wish I had known maybe 3 months sooner so I could be prepared. And I realized breastfeeding might not be perfect. It can be hard, but it can still be positive. You can still create a beautiful breastfeeding story, even when it starts out challenging. And so I kind of just dedicated the rest of my life. I was working as a nurse in wound care, doing diabetic wounds and amputations and helping people heal from that. And I was like, you know what, this is this maternal health is where my heart lies. And so I became a La Leche League leader and a breastfeeding specialist. I became a birth doula and really just threw myself into the world of maternal health and wellness to help moms really get that support that they deserve to navigate this journey, because the medical model is not filling that need the way that I think most of us end up needing it to be filled. So now I am an IBCLC, that's an international board certified lactation consultant. It's kind of a mouthful. And I help moms prevent and overcome early breastfeeding challenges without getting into that spiral of lonely, helpless brokenness. Find their strength, listen to their intuition, and make decisions for them that are rooted in a place of information and intuition so that they can feel confident in the choices they make.
Oh, that's beautiful. I really love, and this is not unusual, that someone's own personal journey and struggle, right, and pain really gave you the biggest gift of finding your purpose in life, which it didn't sound like wound care was really providing that type of purpose for you.
Not at all.
Right. I mean, it was it's like an important role, but it doesn't have to, that may not have been your purpose. Right. So empowering women that are, pregnant and new moms to have, to feel supported and to feel educated and empowered is really one of the greatest gifts that we can give, because we see that this woman is going to make so many different choices from that empowered place regarding her health and her child's health for the rest of that child in her life, right? Like, this is really, I think, the big aha that we find is a woman who has a traumatic birth and is really not supported and not getting the village that she needs and deserves. It's a slippery slope of survival, and we cannot make our best decisions in a place of survival because it's coming from fear versus empowerment.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say, like, your birth experience and your breastfeeding experience are kind of like the gateway drug into finding your inner mama bear. Because I know for me personally, and what I see in a lot of my moms I work with, is they go from handing all their trust over to somebody else and having no idea how to claim their power, claim their strength, claim their intuition. And all of a sudden they see that, like, none of that worked. Handing your power over to other people doesn't work. You have to take charge of that. And it's kind of, like you said, it's that fight or flight kind of survival mode. You don't know what you don't know until you're in the thick of it. And then it's really hard to figure out the right way to go. So that's why I really like to encourage moms, when you're pregnant, if you can, when you are pregnant, please start learning about breastfeeding, about what challenges you might face, how to overcome them, because that moment of kind of, for lack of a better term, that moment of when you're actually drowning is not the time to be like, what is a life raft? Where do I find one? You want to know where all that is, right? Like, you don't want to wait till the house is on fire to think, oh, let's go get a fire extinguisher. You want to have it. So
that's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, actually, I think that's a really valid point. A lot of people don't think about working with an IBCLC or a lactation support person until they have a baby, because they're like, well, I'm not breastfeeding yet. So why do I need to either A, identify who my team is, and B, start working with them and learning from them before I give birth? Because I think a lot of pregnant women are so focused on the birth that they kind of forget about the fourth trimester. And there's a lot of prep that can happen for fourth trimester during the pregnancy, probably a little bit in the third trimester, right? Maybe second trimester, but usually it's towards the end of the pregnancy is a wonderful time for a woman to have her team established and to really know who she can call for afterwards if she is having challenges, and really understanding also what normal is versus common and not normal, I'm going to say, right? So let's talk about this preparation stage that you're referring to.
Yeah, for sure. So if you look back through history as women, women were always considered the ones who are in the village, nurturing the children. You look at early cultures and even still indigenous cultures, the women are, they're building communities, right? The men are out doing whatever men are out doing, and the women are building the communities. They're raising the children and they're leaning on each other. And in that process, they're witnessing breastfeeding, they're witnessing birth, they're witnessing all the like womanly parts of life. And so even if they're not super connected to it directly, they're surrounded by seeing what is normal, what is not normal, and what do you do when it's not normal. But we have been so distanced from that kind of community that we, first of all, most of us did not grow up witnessing our mothers breastfeeding. Some of us did, but by and large, statistically, most of us did not grow up witnessing our mothers and aunts and cousins breastfeeding. It's most women that I talk to tell me the first person they saw breastfeeding was themselves. For me, it was when I was in nursing school. The first person I saw breastfeeding was one of the patients in my labor and delivery rotation. Like, that's the first time I witnessed breastfeeding. And that's the story that most women I speak to have. And it's the story that most men I speak to have. They've never experienced breastfeeding in any way until their wife is breastfeeding. And it kind of becomes this, this conversation of, we have absolutely no expectation because we have no exposure, right? So any expectation we have comes from what we've heard through society, what we've maybe seen on social media, and none of it really paints breastfeeding in a way that is reality. It either paints it as some kind of joke or as like the easiest thing that's just going to come naturally. There's no in between. So I really think it's important. I wish I could get all women before they even become pregnant to really start learning about breastfeeding, just because there is so much to learn and understand, and learning about birth and your options. And I think that is a really good thing about social media now. We don't have that kind of community, but the conversations are happening. And I see these conversations happening so much more than even just 8 years ago, 9 years ago when I had my oldest, that a lot of women who are considering becoming mothers in the near future are starting to see some exposure to some of this content, and they're asking questions, which I think is great. It's like, yes, keep asking those questions. I have friends who are not even thinking of having families yet who have reached out to me and like, I'm so glad you've shared so much of your story publicly, because I'm starting to learn about things I never would have questioned and thought about or known to ask about. And so kind of seeing that is really exciting to me, that maybe we actually can reclaim that kind of sense of community, that wisdom that we have passed from generation to generation. And we kind of skipped this whole generation or two or three with just, the very highly medicalized birth practices, the advent of formula being such a huge industry. That has all really worked so hard to separate us from that wisdom. But now we see, I think we're starting to see the beginning of women kind of reclaiming that community and sharing that wisdom with each other.
I agree. I think that the advent of the internet, which was not even really available for our mothers, right? And social media in particular can have some good value because women love to connect and we love to share. And it is allowing us to do that at a level that wasn't really even possible, a couple of decades ago. And especially if there is a problem, it's even reaching outside of the immediate women that that are in your life, to women living other places that can offer guidance, support, wisdom, or just even open you up to a new idea that you didn't even know that you didn't know, right? So for example, like you're talking about friends who are not yet pregnant, but may want to be a mom in the next couple of years. And now they're watching a video with a woman breastfeeding, for example, on social media, assuming it's not, censored, because there's a breast, that's displayed. Oh God. But recognizing that, just seeing those images and watching these types of things do make it more normal, for example, to breastfeed. I think less shameful, which is really important. And in general, I think in my community, at least, more women are openly breastfeeding in public, which I think is such a beautiful thing. And the more that we all do this, the more it becomes normal and not something to hide or be ashamed of. Just for example, a woman in my practice this morning is still breastfeeding her 2-year-old, and she's from Quebec, and she's like, "Oh, I know it's a little weird here in the States," and I'm like, "I guess it is somewhat uncommon, unfortunately, but I don't think it's weird." But she's like, "Yeah, people give her looks, and." And they also like, oh, is he going to remember breastfeeding because he's so old, and is this going to be, sexualizing the experience, and all of these strange connotations that people have around breastfeeding a toddler, for example, still exist, is what I'm trying to say. And so how do we somewhat, shift that consciousness is just doing it more, because then to me, that is making it more normalized.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And, I always like to tell kind of the story of the conversations that I have with women who are maybe like my mom's age and my grandmother's age. I'll talk to women who had their babies, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And they're like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a lactation consultant." And they're shocked. They're like, "Oh, what?" And I was like, "A lactation consultant." And I like explained to them what I do. And I always get the same response. And it's, "Wow, I wish there was somebody like that when I had kids, because I had all these problems." And they start listing everything, and they're like, "But I didn't know." Like they'll start asking me questions, and we'll go back through their breastfeeding journey. And it's like, "Well, it might have been this or that." And they're like, "Well, the doctor never told me that." Like they're just in absolute shock and awe that like, there maybe was another perspective that, like we said, they couldn't have gotten because they had no way to connect with people outside of a certain, square mileage that they were in, right? Like, so the fact that we can do that is, I really think it is changing so much. And we're not just changing future generations, but I think it is bringing a lot of healing to older generations as they kind of see and hear like, wow, this is different for my daughters and for my granddaughters. And they are often inspired now to start telling their stories. So even if they didn't succeed at breastfeeding, they still have some kind of breastfeeding journey, right? Like they still lactated. Your body automatically lactates after birth. They still had to make the decision, like, I'm choosing not to breastfeed, or I'm going to try it. And I always like to go back to the story of my husband's grandmother, because she just passed away, God rest her soul, a year ago. And she was just over 90 years old. And she breastfed all 3 of her children in the 50s and 60s. Like that was not a thing that you did, but she did it. And she was like, it just felt like right to me. Like everybody was telling me I shouldn't be doing this, but it felt like the right thing to do. So I did. And so her daughter breastfed during a time when it was not popular, the early 90s. She was a very strong career woman, but she made breastfeeding and work when most women weren't doing that, when there were not laws to protect breastfeeding in the workplace. She made it work. And then, so my husband saw that, because there's an 8-year age gap between him and his younger siblings. So he saw that. And so it was very normalized for him. So then he was able to support me in a way that I really needed, because I didn't have that family history. I didn't have people in my family who had breastfed. So it was a normalization for him that she set 50, 60, 70 years ago, like she set that, like that train left the station, and it set a cascading effect of support. And, like the mom that you mentioned, like, she's like, people here don't do that. Like they give me weird looks. And that's what she went through 75 years ago. Right.
Mm-hmm. With an
but
infant.
Look how far we've come. Exactly.
Yeah.
Look how far we've come. And so it makes me so excited for how, like, where we can go in the next few years, because it's like, the more normalization is, the more conversation there is, like the faster that those dominoes start to fall. And I'm getting really excited for that. And I feel like there's a lot of advocacy groups that, they work for, they advocate for legislation to support breastfeeding, legislation to make sure insurance companies are covering breastfeeding. And all of that is so, so very important. I don't want to say it's not important, but you can't legislate better breastfeeding rates when there's a societal disconnect,
Yeah.
right?
It has to start with the society for sure.
Exactly. Like it's just, we have to, as mothers who value breastfeeding, we need to we need to take action to reclaim that. We need to stand up. We need to say, yes, this is important. I don't actually owe anybody an explanation for why it is important. I think so many of us have to feel like we have to defend breastfeeding and, well, give me all the reasons breastfeeding is important so I can convince my doctor why I need support, so I can convince my family members, so I can convince so and so that this is actually important and I do need support. But it's like, you don't actually owe anybody an explanation. It's important because it's important to you. It's because it is important. And let's see what we can do to make sure you're getting the support you need. And you need to be able to say that I need better support. I deserve better support. I don't have to settle for a doctor who's telling me to just take a bottle and stop complaining. And we can reclaim this. And I think that's kind of the next step in bringing breastfeeding rates to where they need to be, is giving women their voices, or not even giving them their voices, but helping them find their voices.
Yes, for sure. I was just thinking back to women, the several decades ago that you were referring to, maybe like the grandmother or other women in that generation, if they, where was that inspiration coming from? If it wasn't something that was socially acceptable and the cultural norm, did they perhaps give birth with a midwife, right? Or do they have more of those holistic, natural type family members? Perhaps their mother breastfed them, right? Like, and they're from a different country. So I do see that certainly people from outside of the U.S. have a much more normal relationships with breastfeeding, right? And for much longer periods of time. So all these factors play into, but I think we're speaking to specifically the American population and society, and how we're viewing breastfeeding. What are the current breastfeeding rates in the United States?
Yeah. So last I checked, there's kind of a lag. The CDC kind of reports a couple years late. So the last I checked, it was around just over 80% of moms start out breastfeeding. Within 48 hours, 20% have been given formula.
Which does not mean they haven't been breastfeed. They don't continue to breastfeed.
Right. It doesn't mean they don't continue breastfeeding, but it means that somebody has set a seed that breastfeeding is not good enough within 48 hours. Now, most of those situations are situations where it's not necessary, which is where the frustration comes. It's formula. I want to be very clear. Formula is not inherently bad. It is not wrong to use. It can be used as a tool, but you have to use it with a sense of education. You have to be making decisions around formula from a place of information, but also you shouldn't be making the decision to use formula from a place of fear.
All right. So Jaimie, can you talk a little bit about the current stats in the United States regarding breastfeeding?
Yes. So around 80% start out breastfeeding, exclusively breastfeeding. And then by 6 months, by 3 months, a lot of mothers have introduced formula. They're still breastfeeding, but have introduced formula. By 6 months, only 1 in 4 is still exclusively breastfeeding. And I believe it's about a third of the mothers who had started breastfeeding are still breastfeeding. When we get to 12 months, I believe the number is right around, it's 15 to 25%. There's different stats, and so they don't all always line up, but about 15 to 20% are still breastfeeding at a year. So it goes to show just that there really is not a lot of great support for breastfeeding. And it does come from different, wow, I just lost the word that I was going to say. I'm so sorry. It comes from like different angles, right? So you've got the work factor, going back to work, the times that moms quit or introduce formula and are no longer exclusively breastfeeding goes back to, it lines right up with when women are mostly going back to work. There's the sense that, you know, after a certain point, breastfeeding or breast milk is no longer nutritious, or maybe the belief that 6 months, because the recommendation is exclusive breast milk for 6 months. So a lot of people think babies only need breast milk for 6 months. And it's like, no, babies need breast milk or formula as the primary source of nutrition for the first year. And so kind of that's where a lot of this is just education.
Right. When you start solids, it's such a small amount of nutrition. It's not the majority of what that baby needs to grow and develop. It's really just introducing their palate and exploring textures and flavors. And it's play. I would say those 6 to 12 months is playing with food, but they still need milk, right? Formula or breast milk.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of moms that are like, oh, my plan is to breastfeed until 6 months, and then I'm going to swap them over to cow's milk or goat's milk. And we have to educate on why that's not safe. Not even that it's not a good idea, but that it's like, if you're going to switch to some type of other milk, it needs to be formulated to be safe for a baby, because those animal milks are not the proper nutritional ratios for a human baby.
Under the age of a year old. That's right. They need the additional nutrients that are found in formula. It's really more of that comprehensive vitamins and minerals that you're not going to find only in milk.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to clarify. Like, animal milk is not the same thing as formula. It's animal milk. And animal milk's not the same thing as breast milk either. Human breast milk. Human breast milk does have all the nutrients that baby needs because it's made for human babies. And cow milk, goat milk is made for baby cows and baby goats, right? So we're not the same species. And so therefore we have different nutritional needs, right?
Yeah. And it's always interesting when you look back at the earlier generations before formula was such a regulated industry. You know, doctors would just kind of give out, I don't know if you've ever seen those posts floating around Facebook or something, but it's like people are digging through their baby book and they find the script that the doctor wrote for how to make formula. And it's like condensed milk, canola oil. It's like these like ridiculous formula things that were not safe. And so then people think that like, oh, well, I was raised on this weird concoction, so it's okay if I give it to my baby. And it's not. It's not. And like, yes, some people may have survived that. We can say that there are people who have survived that, but it doesn't mean they're healthy.
It's not optimal. And I do want to speak a little bit about that. Like, yeah, you might have gotten through that first year despite, parents' ignorance. But like, let's talk about how this proper nutrition that first year of life is impacting the microbiome and the growth and development for that infant, and how that sets the stage for the rest of that child's life, even into adulthood.
Yeah, no, one of the things that my poor husband has to hear me ranting about all the time is that I feel like the most important public health crisis is low breastfeeding rates, because people are, we want to talk about inflammation. We want to talk about the gut microbiome. We want to talk about allergies. We want to talk about so much. And so we start getting back to how food is medicine. And that's great. That is so important. But breast milk is food. And that is the first food. So if we are not at least recognizing that what we feed our babies matters and sets the stage for their health and development, and we're wondering why we have such a sick nation right now, and we look back at the last 50 to 80 years, it's like, well, I can tell you why. I can tell you why. And obviously there's many layers to it, and nothing is one size fits all. I want that to be so clear. There is nothing that is one size fits all, but understanding the risks and benefits of every decision you make, especially around infant feeding, is the only way that you can make confident decisions. And that is probably the most important thing I want all moms to know is, at the end of the day, whether you use formula as part of your journey, whether you use breast milk, what is most important is that you are making decisions from a place of information, intuition, and confidence, that you know that the decisions you're making are the best for your family, that you're not being pressured because of fear, that you're not being pressured because of judgment, that you are doing what you know in your heart and in your soul is best for your baby. And that requires some kind of support. We can't just, in order to make those decisions from that place, you have to have support, you have to have information, you have to have education. And if you're only getting that from, like we said before, if you're only getting that from people who maybe haven't breastfed, then it's not a truly informed decision. If it's only coming from providers who have never had breastfeeding education, it's not coming from a place of information. And that's why I really like to give moms kind of, I say, like, I consider myself a holistic lactation consultant. And that doesn't just mean like herbs and crystals and like the things that people could kind of like label as being holistic. It means putting the whole mom and the whole baby
whole
and the
picture,
whole
the
family.
dyad. Yeah,
Exactly. We got to put the whole picture into the decision making, and we need to look at so many different parts of your wellness. So many different factors of your wellness impact breastfeeding. And I mean, you know that whether it is the gut microbiome and the impacts that has on your health and how that ultimately impacts your hormones, which impact milk production, or if it's just the fact of that you can't get out of this fight or flight mode because you had a traumatic birth and you can't get out of that mode. So now your baby regulates based on your wellness and your nervous system. So they can't get out of that mode. So now you're doing everything that you've seen, everything everyone has told you, but you can't get your baby to latch, and you're not settling yourself down. You're winding yourself up more. You're creating more stress, and you're not going to figure out. So I always hear people say like, oh, well, my baby couldn't latch. I couldn't latch my baby, so I couldn't breastfeed. And it always breaks my heart when I hear that, because every reflex that a baby has is designed to help them breastfeed. That is their only goal in life when they are born, is to breastfeed. That's right. What they are hardwired for.
It's survival.
It is. So if your baby cannot breastfeed, you cannot get your baby to latch, it means there's something deeper going on. And it's usually something kind of complex. It's usually a combination of things. People are always like, oh, well, does that mean it's a tongue tie because my baby's not latching? I'm like, well, it could be. That could be a factor. But it can also be the fact that you had a 36-hour induction followed by a traumatic C-section, and you were separated from your baby for 2 days, and just this whole litany of issues. And it's like, and they could have a tongue tie, and we've got it all mixed up, and it's a perfect storm. And of course they can't latch, because I wouldn't want to do anything anybody's telling me in that situation either. Like, if I went through all of that as a baby, I'm pretty sure I would just be like, life sucks. This is hard. Like, everything's out of order. My reflexes aren't doing what I want them to do. You know, babies aren't that conscious in their thinking, but of course they're not feeding the way they need to, because everything else is just out of whack, and they're not getting the messages that they need to just relax and feed.
That's right. So that's my area of expertise as a maternity pediatric chiropractor. Ideally, I see the dyad, mom and baby, as soon after birth as possible, to get both of their nervous systems calmer in that more of that parasympathetic rest and digest part of our nervous system. And we will see better milk supply for mom, less tension in her neck, shoulders, referring to her head from this tight breastfeeding posture, struggling to latch a baby on and stressed about latching a baby on. And then baby's going to feel safer because mom is feeling safer. And the baby knows, if mom is safe, I'm safe. That's all the baby has to know. But if the baby senses that mom is stressed, which feels unsafe, then the baby's like, wow, maybe there's a tiger around the corner coming to eat me because mom isn't feeling safe, right? We're wired. This has been millennia that as humans, that we're wired this way. And we haven't, we're still wired this way. We haven't evolved beyond this yet. So recognizing that if you are feeling stressed as a mom, that village is so important, and anything you can do to help support your nervous system will benefit both of you.
Absolutely. And that's why I send every patient, I am like, okay, I just moved to a new town, and the first thing I did was like, I need to find a good chiropractor to refer these moms to, because these moms and babies, like, I feel like there's so much that I can do as a lactation consultant, but you need a team of support. You need a team of specialists, and I can do so much, but I never feel like I can fully do my job if I don't have a good chiropractor to work with and to work alongside, because it's like, I can get you to a point where I can give you certain tools. I can give you different breastfeeding positions so you're not hunching over and stressing out, so that you can relax. And so baby's body is physically feeling more supported and they can relax. But when there is so much more going on, we need different experts, right? Like,
Yeah,
we
and
need a
it is a
team of
team
experts.
approach. In my area, I have a couple really amazing IBCLCs I work with very often, along with a couple pediatric dentists, oral surgeons that are specialized in tether oral tissue releases. And, these babies that are struggling sometimes will, and then also there's pediatric PTs that are specialized in infant feeding. So there's like a whole team that we work with, and we refer to each other very often to get the best results, because some of these breastfeeding relationships are very challenging. They have so many different factors going on, and they need that whole team to help them become successful breastfeeding dyad. And so the moms that are really committed to breastfeeding, recognize the value, want to make it happen, they are utilizing all of us, because that's what's required, or it's not going to work out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, why preparing ahead of time before your baby arrives is so important, because then you've already got these relationships developed. They're already nurtured. You kind of know what to do, even if you don't necessarily find the chiropractor right away or find the lactation consultant right away. If you know who you need to look for before your baby arrives, then when things are kind of going off the rails, instead of sitting there being like, well, my doctor's not helping, I don't know what else to do, you know where to go.
Yeah,
You
and
know
we
where to
really
go.
can't expect OBs and pediatricians to do everything. That's just not their role. They cannot provide that type of level of support, which is why a team is so important. And I would say interviewing, ideally you're receiving chiropractic care during the pregnancy, and that chiropractor specializes in infants. So you already know exactly where you and your baby can go, literally on the way home from the hospital. I sometimes will see these dyads. So they're not like researching me, right after birth. They already
Yes.
have that relationship, and they're like, okay, baby's born. When can we, get both of us fit in? And, we'll come over in a couple days. It was like, that's awesome. So that's there. But when it comes to an IBCLC, you can interview for them during your pregnancy as well, and meet with them and have consultation and talk to me about what you do with pregnant women in
Yeah,
preparation.
absolutely. So I always say, you see your OB, what, like 9, 12, 16 times, I don't know what the number is, during pregnancy, and then like once after pregnancy. Well, your lactation consultant should kind of be like the opposite. Maybe you see your lactation consultant once or twice toward the end of pregnancy, and then multiple times after, because that continuity of care is like really, really important. But preparing for breastfeeding cannot be underrated, and or it cannot be overrated, I guess is what I want to say. I meet with moms prenatally. Most of the time, I meet with second time moms prenatally, because they had a really hard time breastfeeding their first. They did not reach their goals, and they want a different story this time. So they want to figure out what happened the first time. Why couldn't I do this? What can I do differently? But I really encourage every mom to meet with a lactation consultant. If you're not going to meet with a lactation consultant, at least take a class. At least take a really good class, and not like the hospital breastfeeding class, like a really good one that goes in depth and is just, 1 hour of, this is what you're going to do in the hospital, and then kind of figure out the rest on your own,
Where can
right?
they find a really good class?
Yeah, so I actually offer different options for classes, and I offer a whole community. And then you can get prenatal breastfeeding support that is one-to-one, where you can screen for red flags that can say, like, that can signal you might have a more complex breastfeeding relationship. There's so many different red flags that we can look for during pregnancy that say, hey, you might struggle more than the average mom. Let's create a plan for that so that you are ready, that you're not blindsided if your milk takes longer to come in, or you're not blindsided if you find out you've got this condition that works against breastfeeding. Like there's so many things that we can screen for. So just making sure you do that prenatal work is really important. I do think a lot of moms, like you said, they wait till after the baby is born and they don't think they need a lactation consultant because they're not actively breastfeeding. But the truth is the process of lactation starts during puberty, right? When we start developing mammary glands. And then during pregnancy, our mammary glands mature. And we have 2 stages of lactation. I'm not going to get all into it, but there's lactogenesis 1 and 2. Lactogenesis 1 is your body preparing to breastfeed during pregnancy. Lactogenesis 2 begins after the placenta separates. So your body is preparing for breastfeeding before your baby's born. Your brain needs to be preparing for breastfeeding before your baby is born.
Right. Definitely. I forgot what I was going to ask you. Well, Jaimie, do you have any last thoughts you want to share with the audience? We need to wrap up.
Yeah, I just want all moms to know that breastfeeding does not have to be perfect to be positive. It can be a rocky road, but you can create a positive story. And if you don't know how to do that, there is support out there. There's me. I am happy. I work virtually. I am happy to work with you. And there are probably lactation consultants in your area who are there to help you find answers. And that's really what you need to do, is find answers. Always know that if there is a problem, there is a cause for that problem, and there is probably some kind of solution. Well, whether that solution is exactly what you want it to be, whether that solution is ideal, is a different conversation, but there are solutions for every problem. You just need that expert guidance to help you find it.
Yeah, it's recognizing that root cause or causes of what's creating the struggle, and then you can take action to shift it. So I know we're going to have a link in the show notes, and there's a coupon code that you wanted to share as well.
Yes. So I have a community for support where you can access breastfeeding classes. You can access ongoing support. So it's called the Confident Mama Bear Society, and you can get in there. You can enroll monthly, or you can enroll yearly, and you can use the code podcast50 to join. And save 50%, where you can access breastfeeding basics classes. You can access different workshops that I offer. I have them all in a hub of resources. And then I also offer monthly support calls where you can come live and ask your questions, or you can get into the support group and ask your questions live. You can get support from other moms, and I jump in there and give that kind of expert guidance to, like, hey, these are the things you need to be looking at and looking for. And if you're not getting anywhere with like these resources and tools, you might need some more in-depth support. But there's a lot that you can get that ongoing support without having to always do the full, because sometimes it's just something so simple. That's what I think a lot of moms don't realize too. Sometimes it's just a very simple adjustment or a very simple tweak, whether that's in your mindset or in just your latching technique. And I've got all those resources inside that hub for moms to access.
Oh, it's wonderful. Jaimie, thank you so much for sharing your passion, your wisdom, your expertise around all things breastfeeding, and really to provide this community for women because to your point, they're getting support from you as the expert, but they're also getting support from all the other moms that are, in that current stage of their life. And it really is nice to not feel alone. If you're having a struggle and you're hearing another mother share the same struggle or similar struggle, then that alone can just help, I think, uplift all of us to recognize that we're not alone. Our situation is not unique. And other moms who have gone before us have, paved the way.
Yes. And they've survived. They've made it. They've overcome, and you can too.
Yes. Well said. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode on all things breastfeeding related with my special guest, Jaimie Zaki. If you want to get some more information about her online support programs, you can check out her website at littlebearlactation.com and use the code welladjusted50 to get 50% off any of her online programs at littlebearlactation.com.